Welcome back, family. This is the Faith Forums podcast. I'm your host, Brock Henderson, and we are exploring the question of what it means to be a Christian in the games industry. Adam is a true brother and a dear friend, and we've made over 20 games together. I'm so excited to be able to talk with him today, and I'm glad you're here.
It's a pleasure to be here. I hope I can bring something of value.
I know you will. I was trying to think, what was the first game we worked on together? It was Flash, right?
Oh, wow. Yes. I forgot we even worked on any Flash games together. Jelly Telly.
So was that Jelly Telly the first?
Yes. That was so early. Because you guys were running the studio when I graduated, and you brought me in pretty much right away. And you had me start working on Flash-based carousels for skincare products while you guys were working on games. So I just watched you. From my corner of the office. It looked like you were having fun.
To give the listeners a little context, I used to own a design studio with my college buddy Brendan. We started that after the doors kept closing and getting into games. So it was kind of like the next best thing for me, right? If I couldn't make games, I'd make crazy Flash interactive websites and stuff. So we started the studio, and Adam was one of the early people that we brought on, like right after school.
I still maintain that ActionScript is a fine language. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with Flash. It's just there's a lot of bad actors out there.
Flash was absolutely amazing. You can make anything in Flash back in the day.
You can make anything in Flash.
It was such a good tool. Then the iPhone crippled it. But
The iPhone crippled it.
I think we did 10 games for Jelly Telly. Jelly Telly was Bill Vischer's venture after Veggie Tales.
And I was certainly on the tail end of that. I was only involved in one or two at the end.
And then let's see, what else we do? We did, you worked on Ya Hero.
Yes, I did. Was that before or after Zombies a la mode?
I think
that was after. I'm pretty sure Zombies a la mode was the next thing. I could be wrong. I guess the timeline's gotten a little blurry, but I think Zombies was the next one. And you guys, I just remember I was not on that project. And you guys were over crunching on Unity.
Yep.
And I had just found out about a new Lua-based engine, and I took a couple of hours to fiddle with it. And I had basically reproduced everything you guys were working on. And you happened to see that I was working on it, came over and said, "What are you doing?" Like, well, I just wanted to try this and see what I could come up with. And I'm pretty sure that day you made a decision to switch from Unity over to the other platform.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Unity's fault. I think part of it was the programmer we were working with. But Corona was very good to us. We made a bunch of games together after that.
Yeah, it was so easy. It was ridiculously easy to make games that performed pretty well.
Yeah. So Corona was a 2D mobile framework that our friend Carlos, we became friends with, and it was pretty awesome. It was all Lua based.
You can't find it by that name anymore since the pandemic. They've rebranded, so they're no longer Corona. Now they are Solar 2D.
Then we worked on Ya Hero. Ya Hero was a Christian MMO. Was it an MMO?
Yeah, it was an isometric MMO. So not as World of Warcraft as you're probably thinking, but yeah, it was.
And it was anime based. It was funded by the Canadian Bible Society, if I remember right. It was client work, but it was it was game. They still owe me a bunch of money. Owe me like 35 grand. Maybe we'll cut this out, but
thanks for paying my salary, even though they owed you money.
Yeah, that was a hard time.
That was fun though. We got to make a bunch of little mini games that were all a part of a larger project. There was fishing games and listening games. lightweight puzzle games, nothing terribly advanced or complex because the target audience was pretty young, but it was fun to just build all these little mini games and fit them together into a bigger project, especially one that was faith based and teaching the gospel.
Yeah, that was really cool. I don't remember exactly what happened. It just kind of imploded. I don't know if they just didn't get enough users. Or
I
maybe you remember better.
I don't remember why it happened, but I remember that their grant money was pulled or not renewed, and I don't think we ever found out why. But they lost their funding and didn't tell us right away. So yeah, cut that out if you want, but then post.
Oh, fixing those. Yeah. So then we went on and made a bunch of original games, just our own ideas. What was the favorite one that you made?
Favorite one?
Yeah.
Hands down, favorite one was Drawbreaker.
Yeah.
Hands down. It was not our most popular one.
No.
But that was definitely my favorite. It was just we really decided that we wanted to spend time polishing it. And I don't remember how long we spent on it, but our timelines were so much shorter than a lot of people would think of for making a game. Like, oh, making a game takes years. We tried to make one a month. And I think Drawbreaker was our longest timeline. And even that was less than 6 months. I think it was like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. 4 or 5. I mean, we were making small games. The App Store was new, and people wanted bite-sized things. So it was great to cut our teeth on that.
Yeah, for sure. Our claim to fame was Float, with something like 3 million downloads, and people really liked it. I was shocked. We put in a Zen mode, is keep the balloon off the ground, and we put in a Zen mode that just had no penalties, and if you popped a balloon, you would get another one, and you could just keep tapping, but we were counting all the taps to unlock achievements. Do you remember how high we set the achievements?
No.
It was something like 10,000. And people were getting the achievements, getting on the leaderboard for 10,000 taps. And then, of course, you get the 10,001 to just claim that title. But I was shocked at how much people were tapping. It was great. So that one was really fun because it got a lot of downloads and people really enjoyed it. It was pretty lightweight, but it also gave us an opportunity to take a mechanic and find new and interesting ways of what was Tommy's word, or was Tommy's word, or was it juice it? Juice it. Edmund's word. Yeah. We had took a mechanic and added on to it and explored different possibilities. So it was just tapping, and then it was okay. We got to add the spikes. So the spikes are going to pop the balloon, and then okay, the spikes are going to move, and then it was adding a wind mechanic. So you had to account for the wind coming in. And yeah, it was fun to just play with the same mechanics and in different ways.
To give people a little background, Float was a game all built around the activity of keeping a balloon in the air. Right? Every child has played with a balloon at some time in their life and just tried to keep it up in the air. And that's kind of what we were, I guess, banking on for the appeal. And
yeah. Nostalgia.
I think it was the #1 kids game or family game in like 39 countries at one point. It kind of shot up and then
I forgot that. Yeah.
Then went back down.
Then it's as a balloon does.
Yes. Very fitting.
And then it got cloned.
Yep. I mean, it wasn't.
Of course.
Yeah. It was
not a hard game to clone. I do think that we put a lot of care and concern into how we built the game.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just about, tap on the balloon and it goes up. You could control where the ball was or where the balloon was based on how you tapped it and hitting it farther. So we gave the player the ability to finesse it and control where it was going. We added some We added that don't tap it too many times or you pop it thing. It was a fairly polished little app that wasn't just a money grab. Like I felt like the clones were just trying to, get something really bare bones out the door, but we actually cared about trying to make a good product.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, a lot of the Elevate games were just focused on the joy of play and humor.
Oh, I always thought that we would see a little bit more from the Mosquito Madness Endless Runner because it was so off the walls. And I thought that we'd get more traction on the Lumina disc throwing game because hardcore rhythm games were in at the time. And then I actually, probably from a gameplay perspective, the free to play game that we made, that one, that one sticks with me because it wasn't just a statement piece, but it actually, I felt like the gameplay was pretty solid.
Yeah.
Even though it was really simple, it was really simple. Just, one screen game with your little character moving back and forth to avoid the blocks that were being dropped on you, jumping on top of them to collapse them. I felt like we did a good job with the controls and giving you flexibility and a motive. And it just had a pretty solid, pretty tightly refined gameplay loop, which I appreciated. I know that some of our testers really enjoyed it.
Did I tell you that somebody I worked with, we brought on in Numinous, kind of as an intern entry level, in their games study course in college, their professor referenced that game.
Get out. Okay, listeners, we made a game out of frustration because it was too hard to make money with paid games. And we called this game free, 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 free to play. And that was abbreviated FFFFF2P. And it was a free download. And it was a simple game where you had ads thrown at you and you had to close the ads. And that was the platforming. With each platform that was thrown at you was either going to squash you or you were going to dodge it and then jump on it to close it. And by doing this, you would earn money and then you would take the money to buy power ups. But the joke was that in order to win the game, you had to pay the ransom for the princess.
Yep.
So
you
every
either
time,
pay it with in-game coins or real money to beat the
or
game.
with real money, if you wanted to win the game with like $3, you could just pay the $3 to win the game. Nothing could be more free to play or pay to win than literally paying to win the game.
But it works because it's a ransom, right? Yeah, there's a ransom. You kidnapped your princess.
That's right. That's right. No, your princess is not in another castle. She's right here. You just got to pay for her.
Then we worked on Beacon, NBA Escape. We did a bunch more. We did some VR stuff for Numinous, and I guess you helped on TDC as well when we ported that to mobile.
Yeah, you guys brought me on to bring that to mobile as well as do some general cleanup to make it more maintainable.
We've had to work on over 20 games together.
I forgot about Beacon. I forgot about Beacon. Maybe I just blocked it out. But that was fun because I think you actually handled most of the heavy lifting on that 2D, 3D game where it was a 2D game, but we faked 3D in it with depth and flight. And that was interesting. You were a little bee character that was flying around and collecting coins. But it was a 2D engine, so everything was actually 2D sprites, and we just faked it. But it worked.
So if people want to play the games that we worked on, where can they go?
Deep into their imagination.
Yeah, I realized this the other day when somebody asked how they could support me and they wanted to buy some of our games on the Google Play, I think it was.
Yeah.
We made like 20 games, and I think the only thing that's still available is that Dragon Cancer. I'm not mistaken.
I think that's correct. I think that's correct. When we were churning out the games so fast, we we weren't thinking at the time about having to maintain them through Apple updates and Google updates. So this was like this was 10 plus years ago, and if you were going to maintain an app through updates so that the new operating system could play them, you'd have to maintain all of that. And that's not something by the time they started falling off availability, we had moved on for years. We had moved on.
Yeah, I mean, so Flash is really kind of no longer around. I'm gonna say that that's kind of a dead engine. And
Oh
then
yeah.
Corona is kind of a dead engine, and Lanica is a dead engine. So
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about Lanica. Lanica was another new engine that was coming out. That was based on the Titanium JavaScript platform. So in theory, it's an interesting idea to make a game engine based on JavaScript because so many programmers know JavaScript. And so Disney was willing to take a shot with one of their subsidiary games. And so we were working on that in this new engine, which was an interesting experience. The engine was not polished. We had to do a lot of things manually without any of the nice APIs that a modern engine would afford you. But yeah, that was in Lanica. I think, what was the name of the engine? Do you remember? Platino.
yeah.
Platino. That was in Platino, which is no longer around. Technically, Corona is still around. It's a completely different. There's only one person around working on it anymore because it's open source and he's being supported through like Patreon. But there was a time when I tried to resurrect one of our old games, and we had too many changes with animations because the animation platform had changed so much or become unavailable. So even though the code to the actual logic code would have been fine, the graphics engine had changed so much that for all intents and purposes, the game is not able to be resurrected. Be
Yeah.
be better to just rebuild it from scratch now in something else.
And I don't think I realized this case of, I guess, bit rot until kind of far into my career, right? Where we
Mhm.
started
Yeah.
not being able to update the games and like keep them up to date. You'd think that it's digital, there could be a way to have it always around, but hasn't been the case.
Yeah. It goes back to the whole concept of entropy.
Yeah.
Anything is going to naturally evolve into lack of order and chaos. And even software, there's projects to resurrect well-loved, not our games, but like famous, well-loved games from decades in the past. There are projects to break out the code and resurrect it. And we see all these emulators from people wanting to replay games that are way, way in the past. But if you want to play before the age of emulators, if you wanted to play a Game Boy game, you had to have a Game Boy. And if you didn't have one because they weren't being made anymore, you wouldn't be able to play it. Now we have things like emulators that were it was people taking the actual source code of the Game Boy and figuring out how to run it and understand it. So now those things are more readily available. But if you don't have serious effort going towards maintenance, you're going to devolve into entropy.
How are you doing with that? That all the stuff that we've worked on kind of hasn't come.
Well,
Well,
I just keep telling myself that I'm going to go back and I'm going to update all of it.
oh,
I'll get around to it. I've been saying this for like 5 years. I'll get around to it. I'll get it all updated and available at some point before I die. It's hard, man. It's really demoralizing to have put so much time and effort and love into a project and just see it disappear into the ether, just not available for me to point at and say, that's a cool thing that I made, or not available to let my kids see the kind of things that their dad worked on, and not available for people who want to support the projects to go and look at it. It's probably not even available for the university student who's studying free to play games. But I guess we have at least we have some videos on YouTube where people can see what the gameplay was like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I maintain that sometime I will go back and I will resurrect all of them, bring them up into a modern and game engine. But
Yeah.
it's hard.
It's something that you and I have talked about a lot. We want to do something that's good and valuable and lasts. And it's really been hard to wrestle with it. You have to, I've had to take an eternal perspective on the work. I don't know. There's so much that it's just out of our hands, right? You do the best you can and you try to do good work and you try to put things that are beautiful and true out into the world. And like they may or may not succeed. I mean, ultimately nothing's going to last anyway.
It just struck me that even large studios with all the budget that they could need are going to struggle with this because consoles change. And what's jumping to my mind is that one of my favorite AAA games is Destiny, and they have released Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, and Destiny 2 is going to continue to be Destiny 2 forever. It will never be Destiny 3 because they're just going to continue to evolve it. But it's too big for all of the content. So they have introduced a vault system where they are adding and literally removing content from the game on a periodic basis. So if you want to go back and play a raid, but it's not currently in the vault, you just cannot play it. You bought it when it came out. You were a paying member when they released it and you enjoyed it, but now it's just gone because it's not active in the vault. And if you want to go back and play content from Destiny 1, but you don't have a PlayStation 4 anymore because you got rid of that, I don't even think you can play Destiny 1 anymore. So they're working on fighting the entropy and bringing back the old content from Destiny 1 into Destiny 2. But the resources that takes is huge. It's massive. So nobody's immune.
Yeah. So why did you leave games?
I felt like I was forced out of games. I felt like in talking with my wife and looking at our family situation, we wanted to try and go for a little bit more stable environment, a little bit more stable working situation. Games at a small studio have an ebb and a flow. And if you have too much ebb and not enough flow, then you just don't have income. And that's hard to budget around. It really just came down to we wanted more stability. And I had unfortunately and sadly given up on games as a viable career unless I wanted to do something that I was unwilling to do, such as move to a major tech hub like Southern California, the Seattle area, maybe New York, any of these densely populated areas that are known for housing large game studios. I could go and work for one of them, but it would be just being a cog in the machine. And a lot of these companies aren't particularly recognized for encouraging a positive work-life balance. And I don't know if any of them are immune to the crunch of a release schedule. And I know that I personally can have tendencies of workaholism. And so I knew early on in my career that I was not going to move to a Silicon Valley, somewhere that I would be sucked in and not see my family anymore. So yeah, I guess once we just started getting a little bit older, having kids, games were something we felt like we needed to say goodbye to.
Did you find the stability that you were looking for?
Absolutely. Yeah. Until it wasn't. I went on and did some contracting for a while. I got to work with some companies that I really enjoyed. I don't regret my time, even if it was short, even if it was short and bumpy. I met some really great people along the way. Lifelong friends, I hope.
Mm. And have the work that you've done, is that still around?
Why you gotta do this to me, man?
Well,
Why,
because this is the
why you gotta
interesting
do this to
part.
me?
I know the answer, but this is what
If you
it's
want
eternal
stability,
perspective.
if you want stability,
Yeah.
say no to startups.
Mm.
But I found myself working at a startup that was building virtual reality products for trade shows. And then 2020 happened and there were no more trade shows. So that company failed. And then I rolled from that company into its sibling company, which was a client services company, also a startup. And that one was actually going pretty well for a while. So well that our largest client wanted to absorb the workforce and just bring us on full time to work for their project. And we all believed in the project. We thought this is a great idea. We should do this. And so we switched to focusing on them full time. And that lasted about 3 years before it too being undercapitalized eventually fizzled out. I think there are still some people trying to keep the lights on, but it doesn't look anything like what it used to. And at least at the time of recording, none of that is available unless you live in a very small geographic location. There are some clients that are still using the software, and there's no reason why they couldn't continue to use it, at least for a while. Servers will probably come offline sometime. But no, generally, it is not still available.
You say that the stability is kind of limited to a startup, but do you really think that there's stability even in a big company? You look at all the massive corporations right now laying off tens of thousands of people. I
I
think
wouldn't be one
stability
of
is a
those.
myth.
I wouldn't be one of those tens of thousands of people. So yeah, having never worked for a major, large company, it's probably more of a figment of my imagination.
Mm. Yeah, I think about the verses where it talks about, not putting your trust in your chariots or your money, or there's a few different verses throughout there. We're supposed to put our trust and, our hope in the Lord. And me
This year or
personally,
next year, we'll go into this city or that city and we'll make profit.
yep, James, yep, yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know. I feel like just my career and my entrepreneurial ventures, God has used it so much to just open my eyes and like strip away things. And sometimes the process has been super abrasive and painful. I, personally, like most of the work that I've done over the past 4 years hasn't come to anything. I don't know if it will.
It's it's very discouraging. I'll join you and I'll say it that I feel like I've never been able to be a part of anything that was truly successful. But I've had this conversation with some dear friends of mine, and they will they'll remind me that just because something didn't become the Angry Birds of the App Store doesn't mean that it wasn't successful. And the magnitude of shipping a product is so large that we shouldn't consider the apps, the games, the products that we have built and shipped as failures. Even if the company didn't end up being financially successful, there was nothing unsuccessful about the code that we wrote, the art that we produced. And that is an encouraging way of thinking about it. The startup that was absorbed, that could be looked at as a huge success because you started a company and you ran it for 3 years and then it was absorbed by a larger company. That's like, that's what a lot of companies want to do. So there's that. I think that a matter of perspective is important. And while I share the sentiment that I haven't been a part of something financially successful, I do think that the ventures themselves have been successful. Shipping a successful product, it can be successful in more ways than just money.
Mhm.
Building the the prayer app that I made was, I think I've made $10, but it was successful because it was the product that I wanted to make, that I felt like the Lord was leading me to make, and it served at least a small audience for a time. And just like the other games, I'll get to it eventually.
I had to adopt a new definition of success. And the best
There you
definition
go.
of success that I've heard is doing what you were created to do. If you're doing that in the context of, a God that created us and put us here for a reason, and
Mm,
we're walking that out, that is success.
mm.
And too often I've been focused on the micro. You get too focused on those little products and stuff. And the
Yeah.
products don't seem to last. I remember you and I both have a bunch of architect friends, and one of my friends from college was talking about how the stuff that they make, stays around, like it's
Mm.
or permanent and stuff. But I'll tell you what, I my house here is from the 1840s, and if somebody wasn't constantly working on
Entropy.
it, wouldn't
Entropy.
it'd be a pile of bricks right now. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man. Um, I'm reminded of the story of Isaiah,
mhm,
a prostitute for a wife, and his calling was to remain faithful to her no matter how many times she was unfaithful to him. That's a failure. Like, that is not a successful marriage, but that was what his calling was. It was a tremendously difficult thing, totally demoralizing every day. And yet he did it. And by being a part of a failed marriage, he brought tremendous glory to God. And I would say that we are called to be servants, to be obedient, to glorify God in whatever situation we find ourselves. And we can actually bring a greater amount of glory to the Father by doing something hard than doing something that fails, even though it's what we were called to do. I I personally feel like God has led me to exactly where I have been. I look back and I see, well, I had two opportunities and I was all set to go to the interview and accept the job offer the next day, but I happened to meet somebody else the night before who said, I just left that company. I don't think you want to work there.
mm,
Go and check it out. And if you don't feel like it's a good fit, come and work with me.
wow,
And the next day, like I said, it was the next day. And it's a coincidence. Is that totally coincidence or is that providence? And in the time, in the time after that, I was offered that second job. I was offered both jobs and I took the one that made me feel like God was rescuing me from a bad situation. And the first company burned out hard,
mm,
and the people involved got got burned and were unhealthy. And instead of that, I met some people that have become some of my best friends. And they do anything for me. I do anything for them. So I see that the Lord is working in our lives. I see that God has brought me from one thing to another thing to another thing until I am where I am right now, today. And I don't know what's next, but I find a lot of comfort in that I've been brought where I am. So no matter what happens, let's say I lose everything, I'm still where God brought me. So remaining faithful, no matter what happens, I glorify God. Just because I was forced out of the games industry, just because I wanted something like stability that I didn't end up getting, I feel like I was brought through that and I was glorifying God through obedience and following his leading. Even though I haven't been a part of something wildly financially successful, and that's hard for me to bear my pride to bear, it's okay. And it's actually better for me to be humble. It's actually better for me to humbly say that I'm where God wants me, to him be the glory in my success or in my failure. I'm going to keep doing it.
Amen, brother. That's really good. I feel like that's a lot of growth. I don't know. I think about us 10 years ago
I don't
and
like to think about that version of me.
no.
He was pretty dumb. Yeah. One of the things that I've learned most, I shouldn't go into that. That's pretty off topic. But in terms of growth, I've learned that not everyone is exactly like me.
I could have told you that 10 years ago.
But 10 years ago, I wouldn't have listened. So yeah, growth. Off topic growth, but growth.
So you're thinking about maybe getting back into the games industry though, right?
Yeah, I am. Really what I want is stability. And I feel like I can get a lot of stability by joining the games
Yeah, yeah.
industry. Yeah, okay. Well, nothing is certain, but there are a lot of interesting projects going on right now. And there's a lot of space in the VR ideas. At this point, I have quite a bit of experience in VR. So it's interesting to look for a role where I could be working on that. And then an opportunity that I'm considering, which would allow me to be in the games industry without having to take on the stress of living or dying on the success or failure of any specific product. It's an opportunity to have a wider range of products and portfolio that would be able to weather storms. And that would actually be really exciting to be able to return to the games industry and work on really cool products, but do it from a less glamorous and hopefully safer vantage.
So here at Faith Forums, I'm exploring the question of what it means to be a Christian in the games industry. And you're one of the best engineers that I know. So I'm curious how your faith impacts your engineering.
I think in a lot of ways. As every good Christian would say, my faith impacts every aspect of my life. But in all seriousness, I think that there's two ways of looking at it. I think there's hard skills and soft skills. I think that when it comes to the hard skills, the technicals, I lean on something that my mom drilled into me when I was a kid, which is if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And when it comes to software, doing something well has a very long lasting effect. It could be a service to yourself because the code that you wrote 6 months ago is going to need an update. And what in the world was I doing here? What was I thinking? Let's do ourselves a service and do it the right way now, so that in 6 months we're not banging our heads against the keyboard. It could also be a service to others because somebody else is going to have to update that code in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Doing something well up front it's going to continue to benefit the project for the project's lifetime. Unless that code is ever unless that feature is ever removed from the system, which some would say is an even better way of writing code, because the code that you don't write is never going to have bugs. Yeah, so doing something in service to others, in service to your future self, and ultimately in service to God, in doing something to the best of your ability are all ways that faith influences how I approach technicals. But there are soft skills at work too. And engineers are pretty notoriously understood to be incommunicative and terse and very focused on just the code and not the interaction.
Mhm.
And I've been in several leadership roles where I've dealt with engineers, and I've been an engineer, and I've started to understand, because the Lord has graciously been growing me, that people receive information differently. People deliver information differently. People handle assignments differently. Some people just want a task list. Some people want autonomy. Some people cannot wrap their minds around a project that's too big. So the best way to serve them is to break it down for them. Some people would be insulted by that. So I feel like one of the most practical ways that God has been working in my life is by growing my understanding of other people and other people's perspectives.
Mm.
The best way that I can serve you is by finding out what the best way is that I can serve you. That means I have to be a listener and not a talker. Sorry to all you dear listeners out there, but I'm talking. It means that I have to set aside my own pride and my own agenda to put your agenda above mine. It means that when there is a failure, instead of throwing you under the bus, I'm going to take ownership of that when I tell my boss. It means we're going to have real conversations. We're not going to dance around the issues because that's not going to make them go away, but we're going to have the conversations with love and grace.
Mhm. Has your love and empathy for people grown too with your understanding?
Absolutely. 100%. The more that you learn to understand other people, the more compassion you can have for them.
So my little time with One Vision when you were there and I was doing a little freelance Unity work with you guys, it was pretty clear that One Vision had a pretty great culture. I'm
Mm.
curious, two things. One is what you learn, what the key parts of that culture were, and then did that come from being believers?
Almost all of the upper management were believers. And I would argue that the one vision that we were pursuing was faith focused. Our mission statement was to speak love and truth into the hearts and minds of young people across the nation. So there was a very strong element to faith that was influencing our decisions. But I would say that the decision is an active thing. Deciding to do something is intentional. And one of the greatest things that has had one of the biggest influences on the company culture is deciding what our company values are and making those company values align with our faith.
Mm.
Those values were things like love. We actually wrote out LOVE as a core company value. Servant heartedness. The most secular one that we had was excellence because we wanted to be excellent and we wanted to glorify God through our excellence. But the ones that resonated the most with people were the ones that were around servant heartedness.
Mm.
We had accountability as a core value. And in our day-to-day operations, I'm going to include myself in the leadership, as I was operating as technical director and I had several direct reports. We encouraged everyone, including other members of leadership and ourselves, to record and submit highlights for one another throughout the week. Any personal interaction that we had with another member of the team was an opportunity for us to highlight them for some part of our core values. They didn't know that they were being highlighted. Perhaps somebody needed help with a bug. So I could highlight Brock for his servant heartedness in taking 2 hours out of his day to help me crunch on this really difficult bug. And then at our weekly meeting, we would go through the highlights from the week. And some of the most impactful ones would even get elevated from our engineering weekly meeting to a company-wide monthly meeting. So this culture that was saturated in these touch points for our core values was very intentional. And speaking with one of my direct reports really encapsulated the benefit of putting together such a strong emphasis on these core values, because he said that the best part of working at One Vision was that he never felt valued for what he could do for the company. He felt valued because of who he was. And I will celebrate that forever.
You don't hear that.
You don't. I'm afraid to work for someone else. I'm afraid to work for someone else who doesn't share a culture like that.
Is there anything else you want to talk about or promote? Do you want to, is your prayer app still available?
Playlist is still available. I would encourage anybody who's interested in trying it out. It uses a spaced repetition algorithm to surface and resurface prayers.
Can you say
I
that
do
again, non-engineer speak, just for the people that aren't programmers?
Spaced repetition? That's like a flashcard thing. That's like a memory technique.
Hmm.
It will resurface prayers to you at somewhat regular intervals based on how much gravity a particular prayer has.
And it's prayers that you wrote that you,
Yeah,
okay.
you enter your own prayers, you can tag prayers, and you can, rather than building a list of prayers, you can put everything in there and tag it. And if you want to pray just for family, you pray for that tag. If you want to pray for family and friends, you can pray for those 2 tags. One of my favorite tags to have pre-populated was enemies, giving people an opportunity and a little nudge to put in those people that are hard to work with. Even if enemies is a strong word, there's a lot of people, and unless you're Sheldon Cooper, most of us don't really have enemies. But we all have people that are harder to work with, or harder to live with, harder to be family with, and remembering to pray for them really helps to soften our own hearts towards them, give us a better understanding of their perspectives, and ultimately love them better.
Is that for iOS and Android?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. We'll have the links down below for people. And that's called Prayer List?
Playlist. Like a
Playlist.
playlist, but for prayer.
Awesome. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining me, brother. Loved our time
My
together.
genuine pleasure. I love what you're doing here. I love the art, every blog post, but I love the mission behind this exploration.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you found this valuable, would you consider passing it along on social media? Also, stop by our website, faithforms.games. There you'll find our blog, podcast, and other resources. Thank you.